So what a hypnotist is doing, the hypnotist is taking over the role of the client's conscious mind. That's what a hypnotist is doing. And setting frames, it's called hypnotic suggestions, but it's setting frames to engage the client's unconscious mind. But the frames that you bring to the party as the hypnotist are different to the typical frames the person has been using consciously, where they have not solved their own problem or found resources to achieve their outcome. Does that make sense? So we are basically stepping in and acting as if we are a very skilled conscious mind for the client, and organizing the information they need to elicit an altered state called trance, and to engage the unconscious mind in changing some pattern or set of patterns to achieve an outcome or to solve a problem. That's the way I think about hypnosis. I think no matter what language or culture a person has, inside the culture, there'll be examples of people making a decision when they're angry and then finding out that there were consequences they didn't like as a result of making a decision while in that state. So that tells us something straight away, that the state of mind that we're in when we're making a decision is important. So there is a state component. So look, I've got a set of slides, but you know what? I'm not going to use them. I think we'll make this more, shall we say, more feedback and more interaction,
interactive,
rather than a formal presentation. So, for me, I think part of it is when you're making a decision, you need information about the context. So you need to be aware of the context that you're in for that decision. So what's the context for the decision? And you've got a decision-making process, but before that, before you make a decision, there must be some stage where you're gathering the necessary information to make a decision about. So you've got this information gathering phase, then you've got the decision-making process, and then, of course, once you've made a decision, a separate process that would follow on is how do you implement the decision? So primarily, I want to talk to start with the decision-making process itself. And why don't we make this more experiential? Is there anybody who is good at making decisions who would be comfortable if I was to ask you some questions? So is there somebody here that...
Chris, yeah, I'll just interrupt. I have got a doozy decision. It's like my life in my current stage is coming to an end. I'm going to sell the house, and I haven't yet decided where I'm going or what I'm going to do. But I've looked at 3 options, and I'm currently getting information for each of those options. And it's a very interesting process for me at the moment with what I'm going through in different times. So if you want to use it, I'm happy. Otherwise, no, it might be.
Well, you've already told me you've already shown me and told me a little bit about how you go about making a decision. Have you got all the necessary? Have you already gathered all the information you need on those 3 options?
No.
No. Okay. So I don't think we can use that specific example. What I would like is an example where the person already has all the information they need to make a decision. But you've got the first part of it, of a decision-making strategy. So once you have all the information, you are going to make a visual representation of the options.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is, when people do that, what I recommend is you make a visual representation of each option separately. So I would make it. So let's say I was going to buy something, I had three options. I would picture option one, and typically I then test it against my criteria. And the way I do it, I typically have a conversation with myself is the way I do it. So I envision having taken option one. So I imagine I've got it. I've made that decision, that option. I talk to myself about to what extent does it meet my criteria, and then I check my feelings about it. That's the way I do it. So I'm using all three representational systems. Then I put option one aside, and then I do the same thing. Then I do a visual representation of option two, and it's a future representation that as if I've already taken that option. So I step into that future, and then I talk to myself about, is it meeting my criteria? And then I get a feeling for it. And then I repeat the process for the third option. And I typically just take the one that feels best. Now, as a decision-making process, that works pretty well for me. I can make a decision pretty quickly. Now, but the necessary prerequisite is having done my research on each option and actually being very clear about what my criteria is for that. Let's say if I'm making a purchase,
do you have criteria around when you have enough information? When is enough information or some kind of criteria around when you have enough information. I think some people might get stuck in the loop of constantly getting more information.
But I'll gather information and then I get a feeling I have enough. So I get a kinesthetic signal when I have enough information. By the way, my wife has a similar strategy. So I'm thinking one decision she made about whether to write a chapter for a book or not. So I introduced her to the editor of a book that I was doing a contribution chapter for, and because I didn't have enough time to do a second chapter, and they needed another author, I said, "Oh, well, have a chat to my wife, Jules," and so what Jules did, she asked a whole series of questions to gather the information. So this is the information gathering part of it. Until she had a clear visual representation, so auditory external, she had a chat to the person, asked a lot of questions, and then she built a picture of what the editor wanted. And when she had a very clear, detailed representation of the editor's outcome, in her case, she then asked her unconscious mind whether doing this was then acceptable. So once she had a clear brief, this is her words, clear mental image, she then checked with her unconscious mind. And in this example, she got a kinesthetic signal for yes. So it's similar. It is similar to my strategy. I start with a picture. I already know my criteria, talk to myself, then get a feeling for it.
I've seen people struggle to make a decision, and they've told me they cannot see the future. They cannot see that path. They cannot see that. And sometimes a client has the idea, but it's very fuzzy. But after coaching, the picture becomes clear. And some modalities, come right.
So if somebody says that to me, a couple of things. One, I want to know, do they already have a successful mental process for making a decision? Okay. And if they have examples where they make good quality decisions and they have a process for doing it, then that would tell me that they may not have all the necessary information to build a clear visual representation. But I understand, first of all, I want to find out, have they made successful decisions in the past that they're happy with, and when they have, how did they do it? And the fact that they can make good quality decisions from the past, then that tells me that it's likely to be a problem with they haven't got the necessary information yet. So anyway, that's a simple, that's quite an effective, simple strategy. Let me just back right up. Let's just back up for a moment. Now this is my views on decision making. So one, some people make quick decisions. Some people have decisions that it just drags on and on and on. That's one issue. Can a person make a decision, a good quality decision, fairly quickly? I think that's important. And two, do they have a decision-making process that leads to good quality decisions? So I see those as the two key issues. So now, have you met people where they just take an extraordinarily long time to make a decision? Let's give us some information. What are the issues that you're aware of in terms of decision making, either with yourself or with other people?
I got a friend that makes a decision, and then a day later they regret the decision, and then a day later they're back on and the decision's on, and then 5 days later the decision's off.
Isn't that interesting? Now, I've got a pretty good idea what that indicates, but I'm curious. What do you from audience? What do you think? What's going on?
We want everything.
Possibly, I don't think that's. I suspect that's not the issue. That's not the problem.
So I think it's my wife, like my wife, but like my wife.
Hang on, she's already correct. You know that.
She can make decision, and yeah, it seems that she always make the wrong decision.
Okay. Now, does she make a decision one day, then and a day later or a couple of days later, she then says no?
She simply regrets.
Okay, so this sounds like the same pattern. Okay, so this indicates to me that I would want to check when you think about day one, let's call it day one and day two, or time one and time two. The first question I would want to find out, is the person in the same state in time one and time two, or is it a different state? So I suspect that she, in one state, she goes, yes, this is what I want to do. And some time period later, she's in a different state. She goes, no, I don't.
In a coaching state, get resourceful, make the decision, and then later on in a shitty state, yes, scarcity state.
And if it was in a coaching state, the person's being coached, then I would want to check, if I was coaching, did I have the person future pace? So they made a decision during a coaching session, and I want to take them into the future and check, does that decision remain when they go into different contexts in their lives, or does it not hold in one or more contexts? So a general principle, our states change depending upon what context we're in. And then we've also, as part of that, there's a piece of psychological research. It came out of Stanford, actually. I think it was the 1980s when this research was done. There's an area of research called state-dependent learning. Anybody know about state-dependent learning? Heard about that research? You have, Peter? Fantastic. Very briefly, very briefly. They gave some students, they taught them some material in class, so in the classroom, and then an hour or so later, they tested them back in the classroom, and then another hour or so later, they took them down to the gymnasium and gave them the same test. So they got the exam twice, once in the classroom and once in the gymnasium. And what they found, of course, that there was a deterioration in their results, a drop in results when for the test that was done in the gymnasium. Because the gymnasium is a different context, it's going to evoke a different state. But when they test in the classroom, they're in the same context, and they're more likely to be in the same state they were in when they learned the material. And then they did a whole stack of variations on this. Some really wild or wonderful ones, like teaching some material on dry land and then putting them into an aqualung and having them do a test under the water and having them do the test on dry land, and then having them learn something while they're underwater, then doing the test underwater, and then doing the test on dry land, stuff like this. So they were quite creative in coming up with scenarios of different contexts where they could do the experiment. And basically, they developed from that a theory called state-dependent learning. Now, from an NLP point of view, for those of you who've had some NLP training, that would just make absolute sense to you, because, of course, our states, we have different states in different contexts. And we do a lot of work with reactivating states in different contexts using our sense memory, for example. Basic classic code, one way of state elicitation. Think of a time when you were in state X, put yourself back in the memory, relive that experience. Okay, so that's one problem. So Bill, I would suspect that your wife may be in a different state.
Yeah, she's in different state every day, I know, but I'm not sure if she regret because of different states.
She's not here, is she? Yeah, she's not on this call, on the Zoom call.
Oh no, she has no knowledge about NLP.
Okay.
She's not there. No worry.
Okay.
I'm safe.
I was just doing what we call an ecology check. No, but the point is, okay. So yeah, so she's in a different state, and so the issue for her might be about stabilizing a state and testing that and running that decision through a variety of different contexts. Because the fact is, if she's in a different context and the state is different, that might be a form of internal objection to the decision as well. So that might be a valuable concern. So you just have a check whether the decision holds in a variety of different contexts in the mind. And if it doesn't hold it in a specific situation, ask her, with rapport, ask if she has any concerns about that decision in that context.
I'm not sure whether she's in different states when she regrets, okay? But I will say that probably she's looking for different need, okay, in different days. I'm not sure it's the same as states. For example, in the first day, I want to make money, I want to be rich, and that's today's desire, right? But the next day, I better be safe. I want to be okay. I want to be stable, right?
Yeah, it's a different state. It's a different state.
It's a different state.
Yeah.
Okay. So different need means different states.
Okay, so
different state mean different needs. Okay, yeah.
so the one solution for that is this is what we call a sequential incongruity.
Mm.
Okay. Now I don't know how much NLP training you've had yet, but we have an NLP process called negotiation between parts for resolving conflicts, where you've got these two different states,
Yeah, this one.
and so on. So negotiation between parts. Uh, um, and if you know that process, that's one that might be useful for your wife. If you don't, have a chat to Adrian, because I know Adrian's familiar with that NLP process. So, okay.
Yeah. And can I just add in here though, there is value in changing their mind and the state. And I'm jumping on here because I've heard this problem again and again. It seems largely it is often us men with women, but there is value in being spontaneous and following the emotion of the day. It's just that gets in a bit of a way when it comes to making a decision about something like buying a car or
Yeah.
changing location.
So
there is value in that women, or there is value in the not making a decision. But here we're talking about making solid, lasting decisions that are ecologically sound.
yeah, and now back to what Joe was talking about. So let's say I'm making a decision between three options. I would not represent all three options simultaneously. Okay. So you put it into a sequence one at a time. And the example I use in my one decision-making strategy I use, build a visual representation, construct one of being in the future, having the option, taking option one, have a chat to myself whether it meets the criteria, get a feel for it. Then I do a representation of the second option. So it's done in a sequence. But if I was to have all three options represented simultaneously, I'm going to get mixed feelings about it.
And that's what a lot of people do, don't they? A lot of people kind of hold and they're switching between representations, or they're seeing two at the same time, not having them cleanly separated.
Yeah, if they're doing two or more at the same time, and they're more likely to end up being overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think I used to try to be smart and put it in left and right side method,
Yeah.
which probably is mixed feelings together, and you don't know which one is more important to me because both are in front of me at the same time.
Yeah. So you just sequence it one at a time.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference. Okay.
Is there any problem there if we leave an anchor down for each one? Like we finish decision one and leave a hat down there, do decision two, leave a hat there.
Absolutely. You could do it also, you could do it spatially on the floor. You can mark out three spaces if you've got three options. But once again, you would represent the future where you've taken option one that's saying step into it so that you're as if you're in the future. What we call first position of people, but your position as if you're there, and then now with my strategy that I described, I'm using all three major representational systems. Does that make sense? Visual, auditory, in this case, it's internal dialogue, and kinesthetic. So I'm engaging three representational systems when I'm making the decision. And that way, it's more likely to be a good, clean decision. Now, by the way, this decision-making strategy I use is quite fast, but it's dependent on having quality information. So there are other NLP tools for gathering information. If you're gathering information from other people, you might use the meta model when gathering information. And once you've got the necessary information, then you go through the decision-making process. Now, I'm going to just mention a process that my partner and I use, which engages all representational systems. It takes care of criteria, and it does a future test. And Peter, you've seen this before on one of the previous talks. Outcome, intention, consequences is what it's called. We model this out, John Grinder. We saw him running this particular process during an open frame 2 or 3 times with different people. We went, my God, did you see that? I said to my partner, she said, yeah. And so we just took that pattern and put it into a little format, a little spatial format that you can apply for yourself. It's very, very simple. So let's just use an example. You've got 2 options. You're choosing between 2 options, okay? Option 1 and option 2. You take option 1 and you build spatially, you build a representation of being in the future, and you mark this out on the floor. You step into that future spatially mark it out on the floor of having the outcome. You've got that option. So, Jay, you're thinking about, you've got an option for a new home. So you envision that physically. You would physically stand up, envision that before you, and then step into it and mark a space on the floor that represents that option. Then you consider, what do you want this particular option for? So you're going to get now for a house, you're probably going to get a series of intentions. It won't just be one intention. So I'm thinking about getting a new home, right? So I imagine one type of home that I like, that I've seen. I've already gone out and I've done some house searching. I've been taken around by real estate people to some different properties. And I put myself in the future where I've chosen this one, let's say option 1. And I consider, well, what do I want that for? Well, I want it for, the intention is to have a place that's comfortable. How would I know if it's comfortable? Whether it's going to be spacious, high ceilings, lots of glass, so north facing, so it gets lots of light. If you're in the northern hemisphere, south facing. Okay. I want greenery or some sort of scenery, attractive scenery outside when I look out the windows. Okay. I want minimalism. So I'm going through, this is my criteria. My intentions are to have all these particular qualities met. Okay. And I'm acting as if this is the house I've taken. By the way, we went through this process, my partner and I, August last year. So we're in a new place from September, and we knew we had a discussion beforehand. We knew what our criteria was. We actually have very similar, very much matching criteria. My wife and I like the same qualities, and then we imagine that we've been there for X period of time. Now, it all depends. You decide how long you've been there for. So in my case, I imagine having been there a year. And then checked out in my imagination, what are the consequences of having selected that particular place? Okay. And I compare it against my criteria. Do I get a match in all my criteria in the further future? And then I step out of that, and then I look at option 2, house number 2, and I envision that house step into another space on the floor that represents having that outcome, that option. Check out, what do I want it for? And I already know my criteria from the previous exercise, so it's going to be the same criteria. And then I envision a year further into the future and check, is the criteria still being met? And by the way, all our criteria that we made a decision on this place, it still holds. All that criteria is still met. Now we're in April. All met very nicely, in fact. So it's open, high ceilings, nice greenery outside. We're in a lovely area, just a really beautiful area. And it's nice and quiet. So all the criteria that we have is being met. It's incredibly quiet, and yet we're 50 meters away from a very popular pub. Or, I suppose in America they call it a tavern, I suppose. Because of the way the place is organized, we don't even hear it. It's nice and quiet. No street noise, no pub noise. Fabulous. So all the criteria is met. Does that make sense, Jay? Now, there's other criteria you're probably going to have in terms of price, stuff like this. But anyway, you work all that out. That's all part of your research and information gathering. Make sure you know your criteria. Then you just spatially mark it out. So we call it outcome, intention, consequences. And basically, my partner and I, we use it for all our significant, important decisions. And note, it involves all three representational systems. So when you imagine having that future, I'm stepping into a future where I'm aware of what I can see in that future, what I hear, and how it feels to be in that future. So all the major senses are being activated. Okay, any questions about that?
I just want a bit of clarity.
Yeah.
I understand that if I had two houses and I'm going to pick which one meets what I'm needing.
Yeah.
The issue, I've actually just realized I've already worked through the options that I have, and I've already ascertained the feeling which is best for me.
Yeah.
And what I'm not understanding, I'm saying feeling, but is it the logic or the emotion? Which one really is the most important?
Okay.
Because this is a very life-changing part of the decision.
Okay.
And I make those big ones quickly.
Thank you so much, because what you've brought up is the very next place I want to go. This is where I was intending to go. I don't know how the hell that works, but that's exactly where we're heading right now. That was next piece on the agenda. So there's a university in the Netherlands that did a piece of research, and their question was, does the conscious mind or the unconscious mind make better decisions? Now, first of all, I was just amazed that a psychology department would do a useful piece of research like that. That's a great question. That's a fantastic question. And so I'm going to put this question to you. Do you think your conscious mind or unconscious mind makes a better decision?
I think most of the time it's subconscious, unconscious. Because previously, in the last 20 years, I try to avoid making decisions based on finding supporting facts, right? Because I already have a decision, and then I look for the supporting facts, right?
Yeah.
And I know these tricks. Okay, I know these tricks.
Yeah.
And what I try to fight for that pattern is to find three opposite unsupporting facts. Try to balance myself.
Yeah.
So
I think
it might work. But
I think it's a very good idea, because, if I can make a decision and then I look for evidence that supports the decision I made, that's a bias. I'm just out there finding evidence to support the decision I've already made. So looking for counter examples can be very useful. And that's basically what you're doing when you're searching to find, you're already searching to find counter examples, that is, examples that don't fit with the decision you made. Now, let's talk about the results they got in the research. Okay. And I'll leave you with the question that they have. Their question is their question. Does the conscious mind or unconscious mind better at making decisions? Well, what they found was that for things like inconsequential minor content, such as, do I eat Malaysian or Italian for dinner tonight? Okay. Yeah. Do I have Japanese or Korean food for dinner tonight? As inconsequent, it's really probably it's a very it's insignificant decision. And they found for those types of decisions that the conscious mind made better decisions. So for the minor stuff. And what they found was for significant stuff, do I get married? Do I marry this person? Do we have a child? Do I change my job? Do I start a new career? Do I shift countries? Those important big decisions. According to their research, they found that the unconscious mind makes a better decision. Now, what's the difference if you think about it? Well, for the minor decisions, you have a small amount, small quantity of information. You only got a little bit of information. I can easily run a comparison between, let's say, having Malaysian or Japanese, right? It's not going to take a significant amount of thinking. So my conscious mind can handle that in terms of my conscious mind's limits, 7 plus or minus 2. But when you're making a big decision, there's typically a lot more variables involved for making a major decision. And so it makes sense to me that that's what they found. However, I thought it was a great piece of research. Now, I don't think the question is the right question, actually, that they have in their research. So in my view, it's not about whether one mind, a conscious mind or an unconscious mind, is better at making a decision. Because in my world, I think it's useful that you engage both your conscious mind and your unconscious mind in making a decision. And this is really, I want to address this to Jay and to Bill. So, as the example with my wife, there was a proposal that she write a chapter for a book. So she gathered her information until she had, and based on the questions she asked, she built she constructed a representation of exactly what she believed that the editor wanted. Now, it'd probably be in her case, it'd be a pretty accurate description, a visual description of what the person wanted, because she's damn good at asking questions. Okay. And then having done that, she then proposed it to her unconscious mind, and to find out whether her unconscious mind gave her the go-ahead, yes, do it, or no, don't do it. So she used her conscious mind to gather the information and then to organize the information into a form that her unconscious mind could process, and then she handed it over to her unconscious mind to do the processing and to give the final yes, no, or actually, you don't have enough information. You need to do some more research. That's how she. Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
It's okay.
That's okay, Bill.
Chris,
Peter,
can I ask a question?
how about Peter, then Harry?
Okay.
Yes.
Just related to that research in the Dutch institution, I'm heavily reading back again The Master of the Mystery from Ian McGilchrist.
Oh,
so the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere.
Yeah.
Is that the unconscious and the conscious?
I would love if it was, because it would make things so much simpler for me. But unfortunately, it's not. So now I think it's more complex. So with the left and right hemisphere, as you know from Ian McGilchrist. So Peter mentioned a book by Ian McGilchrist, a very, very good book called The Master and His Emissary. And he puts to bed a lot of misunderstanding of left brain, right brain, different hemisphere roles. There's a lot of misunderstanding and kind of like the pop psychology in societies about what our left hemisphere does, what our right hemisphere does, and there's this idea that people have that you want to maximize information going between each hemisphere, going two-way between each hemisphere through the corpus callosum. When in actual fact, 2/3 of the nerves are inhibitory. So this is a McGilchrist book. So part of the function is when we're doing a left hemisphere function, the left hemisphere will inhibit the right hemisphere. And vice versa, if you're doing something which is a right hemisphere function, the right hemisphere will then inhibit the left. So conscious and unconscious are involved with both hemispheres. So if I'm doing something which is left hemisphere and I'm consciously attending to it, it's in my limited working memory, then that's that part of the left hemisphere is being activated. So let's say language, or I could be doing, let's say language. But then if I put my attention to doing something which is a right hemisphere function, then the portions of what I'm doing that I'm putting conscious attention to will be in my conscious mind. It's in my working memory. So see, that's the interesting thing. So the left hemisphere, so conscious mind, unconscious mind do not correlate, do not match up with left hemisphere, right hemisphere. But it's pretty interesting stuff. By the way, I would highly recommend the book. I think it's a fabulous book.
The reason I answered that question was how they could actually research this in a university, the conscious mind and unconscious mind. It's like, how do you measure that?
I can't remember. It was a long time ago when I read this. I'd love to find the paper. I've got the paper buried away somewhere. I'd love to find it again. But they did, and it was a Dutch university. I can remember that much. I remember the results, and I remember it was a Dutch university. I mean, we played with some stuff when I was doing my psychology degree in one of my cognitive psychology classes, where we're doing phenomena which definitely involve the unconscious mind. Though they didn't call it that, but it was obviously engaging the unconscious, what we call priming experiments. So if you want to look at a little piece of some ways that research is done into, well, this is involving the unconscious. Look up dichotic listening experiments. I'd probably do a search on dichotic listening. That's the term, dichotic listening, and priming. And what that is, they put some information through one earphone and they have some other information through the other. And now, this is going back a long time when I did my degree, so I'm talking about over 35 years ago. So from memory, what the experiment we did, in one earphone, you're hearing a story, and in the other earphone, you're listening to a list that is being recited. So there's a list of words are being recited, and then you do a recognition test. You circle every word you recognize, and the stuff that's been primed, you get a pretty good, significant a recognition of the primed words. So, but that makes sense from an NLP point of view, because we know that your conscious attention can be on, as limited, it could be on something, but your unconscious mind is still taking in information from the world, from parts of your experience that you're not paying attention to. Anybody done any simple drills with Ericksonian hypnosis? Anybody done any Ericksonian hypnosis?
Hypnosis? You mean hypnosis?
Yeah, hypnosis, yes. Let me just say a couple of things to you. So I'd like you to do a little experiment right now. So you're aware of the sound of my voice, aren't you? And you can see me on the screen. And you might be aware of just adjusting your posture. And you may now become aware of your breathing pattern, the rise and fall of your chest. And you can be aware of the tonality in my voice and the combination of tone and rhythm. And now I'd like you to become aware of the sensations in the heel of your left foot. Now, all I'm doing is we're just having you shift your attention from one thing to another, and everything I mentioned must be part of your experience. Unless you've got earplugs and you're aware of the sound of my voice. I can see it with your eyes closed, so your eyes are open, you can see me, right? But note that I brought things in. Note that your attention kept shifting, didn't it? From one part of your experience to another. Was there anything I mentioned that you had not been conscious of before I mentioned it? There's bound to be, because I made sure we did enough items to be beyond your typical 5 to 7 plus or minus 2. I think we stretched it out.
I'm not sure. Did you mention my left leg?
No, I didn't mention your neck, but I did mention posture. So shifting posture, and you may well become aware of the sensations in your neck as you did that. By the way, was everybody aware of the sensations in their left foot before I mentioned it?
Left foot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think you mentioned left foot once.
Yeah, but note that as each chunk that I chose was mentioned, your attention went there. So your conscious attention shifts. But note, some of these things that you weren't aware of until I mentioned them, that you became aware of, that information was there the entire time. It was already there. It's just that your conscious attention was not attending to it. So conscious attention is a movable feast with a limited capacity. And so you have an unconscious mind that's taking in a whole stack of information that you're typically not paying attention to. And now, there are different roles for conscious and unconscious minds. So what our conscious minds are very good at doing is organizing and chunking information. And frankly, we have to be in a technologically sophisticated society. We all live in technologically sophisticated societies. In those type of societies, we need to be able to organize information and chunk it. We have to be. We can't do our work without having chunking skills. So that's our conscious minds does that work. Now, a lot of the NLP formats, or some people call them techniques. Just for the record, I really don't like the word techniques, but anyway, let's call them formats for now. They're a set of instructions for help you to organize information in a form for your unconscious mind. That's what those processes are doing. And you're organizing the information often in a particular sequence, a set of steps.
Chris, I wish Sonny was here. Sonny's not here right now. Sonny's been asking, like, what is NLP? What is coaching? And I'd like to say, like, from what you just said about setting the frame, I hope people could imagine now how a coaching conversation could go, or how an NLP session could go. It's not the coach, Chris or I, sharing our expertise, but it's about taking attention to specific parts of the experience in a sequence that helps people get a wonderful result. So if you want to know, yeah, I thought that's such a beautiful thing, and I wish Sonny was here to see it. But what you're saying about having the frames is just a wonderful way of explaining content-free coaching, NLP and coaching, and what we do. Next week, Chris, we're going to be doing, no, next week we're not going to be here because next Sunday is Easter, and I hope you all, if you're family, you'll do something for Easter, but after Easter, we're going to be doing the end step. We'll be doing the end step here.
Yeah, I love the end step. It's a nice universal pattern for change. So yeah, that's what we're doing. That's when we're coaching, we're organized. Okay, let's go further with that. So you have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and the frames that you set, the way you organize information and set and frame things for your unconscious mind. And then you pass it over to your unconscious mind that does the processing. So outcome, intention, consequences is a sequence where you're making sure we've got all the necessary information organized for each option so that your unconscious mind can then make a decision on it. That's what you're doing. Now, just to build on what Adrian just said, you've got a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. Now, this is the way I think about hypnosis. So a client comes to see you, and let's say you were a skilled hypnotist. So a client comes to see you, and basically, part of the problem is if we chunked it right up, is that the way they're organizing and framing information is not helping to solve the problem or to get the outcome that they have. Because if they had excellent self-framing skills and excellent information gathering skills and knew how to organize the information to get their outcomes or to solve their problems, then their unconscious mind would be able to generate the resources they need and all the solutions that they need, and they wouldn't need to see you. So what a hypnotist is doing, the hypnotist is taking over the role of the client's conscious mind. That's what a hypnotist is doing. And setting frames, it's called hypnotic suggestions, but it's setting frames to engage the client's unconscious mind. But the frames that you bring to the party as the hypnotist are different to the typical frames the person has been using consciously, where they have not solved their own problem or found resources to achieve their outcome. Does that make sense? So we are basically stepping in and acting as if we are a very skilled conscious mind for the client, and organizing the information they need to elicit an altered state called trance, and to engage the unconscious mind in changing some pattern or set of patterns to achieve an outcome or to solve a problem. That's the way I think about hypnosis.
Boom! You made it here! Good on you. Make sure you click the subscribe button below and check out the playlist at the end. If you'd like to come along to our Sunday sessions where we host a live free Q&A for our students and members, you're welcome. I'll see you there.